The notification sound from my wife's phone cut through the 2 a.m. silence like a blade. Sarah had left it charging on the kitchen counter again, and the blue glow illuminated our darkened house with an almost mocking light. I should have rolled over and gone back to sleep. I should have minded my own business. But 15 years of marriage teaches you when something's wrong. I padded barefoot across the cold hardwood floor, my engineering mind already calculating probabilities. Work emergency? Unlikely at this hour. Family crisis? Her parents were in Florida, safe in their retirement bubble. The phone buzzed again, more insistent this time. The screen showed 3 missed calls and 2 text messages from Jessica Work. Sarah's sister-in-law, technically, though she'd wormed her way into my wife's law firm as some kind of consultant. I'd never liked Jessica. She had that entitled air that comes from growing up rich and never being told no. My thumb hovered over the screen. Sarah's password was our anniversary date. She'd never been creative with security. The rational part of my brain screamed warnings about privacy and trust. But the soldier in me, the part that had kept me alive in Afghanistan, whispered that reconnaissance was survival. I unlocked the phone. The first message made my blood run cold. Tom's working late again. Perfect opportunity. Are you coming over? The second one made me want to put my fist through the wall. I've got that bottle of wine you like. And those handcuffs we talked about. I stood there in my own kitchen, wearing nothing but boxers and 15 years of accumulated trust, reading about my wife's affair with my former best friend, Tom Mitchell, the guy who'd been best man at our wedding, the guy whose kids called me Uncle Jake, the guy who was apparently screwing my wife. My hands started shaking, not from cold, but from pure, concentrated rage. I'd survived roadside bombs and Taliban ambushes, but this felt like the ground was literally crumbling beneath my feet. Sarah had been working late 3 nights a week for the past 2 months. Jessica had been encouraging her to spread her wings and find herself. Now I knew what that meant. I took screenshots of everything, my military training kicking in automatically. Document everything. Verify intelligence. Plan response. The phone buzzed again, another message from Jessica. He's such an idiot. Completely clueless. We should tell him after the holidays. After the holidays. Like I was some kind of inconvenient detail to be handled later. I set the phone back exactly where Sarah had left it, the charging cable positioned at the same angle. Then, I walked to my home office and opened my laptop. If they wanted to play games, I'd show them what a real strategist looked like. By morning, I had a plan. Sarah came downstairs at 7:30, perfectly dressed in her charcoal gray suit, blonde hair pulled back in that severe bun she wore to court. She looked beautiful and professional, and completely, utterly false. "Morning, honey," she said, kissing my cheek with lips that had probably been on Tom's mouth 12 hours earlier. "You're up early." "Couldn't sleep," I replied, sipping my coffee and watching her over the rim of my mug. Weird dreams. She grabbed her phone from the counter, checking her messages with the casual efficiency of someone living a double life. Her face showed nothing as she read Jessica's text, but I caught the slight tightening around her eyes. "Big day today?" I asked. "The usual. Late meeting tonight, probably won't be home until 10 or 11. She was good. I had to give her that. The lie rolled off her tongue like she'd been practicing. With Jessica? The question hung in the air for just a moment too long. Sarah's fingers paused on her phone screen. "Among others," she said finally. "Strategy session for the Morrison case." The Morrison case had been settled 3 weeks ago. I knew because I'd helped her celebrate with champagne and take out Chinese food. But I just nodded and smiled. "Well, don't work too hard." She kissed me goodbye, and I watched through the kitchen window as she backed her BMW out of our driveway. 20 minutes later, I was following her at a distance in my pickup truck, staying back far enough to avoid detection, but close enough to see where she was really going. She didn't go to her law office. Instead, she drove to the Riverside Shopping Center and parked outside Victoria's Secret. I watched from across the parking lot as she emerged 30 minutes later with a small pink bag. Then, she hit the liquor store, buying what looked like an expensive bottle of wine. Preparation for her strategy session, no doubt. My phone rang as I was tailing her back toward downtown. The caller ID showed Mitchell Construction, Tom's business. Jake, buddy! Tom's voice boomed through the speaker with that false heartiness that had always grated on me. How's it going?" "Can't complain," I said, watching Sarah's BMW turn into her office parking garage. "What's up?" "Linda's making that pot roast you love on Friday. Want to come over for dinner? Bring Sarah if she's not working." The casual way he said it made my jaw clench. This was a man who'd eaten at my table hundreds of times, who'd borrowed my tools, who'd asked me to be godfather to his youngest daughter. And now he was screwing my wife and inviting me over for dinner, like nothing had changed. "Sounds great," I heard myself say. "We'll be there." "Awesome." "Hey, has Sarah mentioned anything about working late this week?" "Linda thought she saw her car at that new wine bar on 5th Street yesterday evening." He was fishing, trying to figure out if I suspected anything. The arrogance was breathtaking. "You know how dedicated she is to her clients," I replied smoothly. "Sometimes I think she loves that job more than she loves me." Tom laughed, but it sounded forced. "Well, we're lucky to have such hard-working wives, right?" "Lucky," I repeated. "That's definitely the word for it." After I hung up, I sat in my truck for a long moment, processing the sheer audacity of what I'd just experienced. They weren't just betraying me, they were enjoying it. The secret glances, the coded conversations, the elaborate lies. It was all a game to them. Fine, I'd show them how games were really played. I spent the next week conducting surveillance, like I was back in the army, tracking enemy movements and gathering intelligence. Sarah's patterns were predictable once you knew what to look for. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday were her late work nights. She'd leave the office at 6, drive to various locations around town to establish an alibi, then end up at Tom's house by 8:30. Tom had his own routine. He'd send Linda and the kids to her mother's house on those same nights, claiming he had paperwork to catch up on or client calls to make. Linda Mitchell, sweet and trusting Linda, never questioned it. Why would she? Her husband was a pillar of the community, a successful contractor who coached Little League and donated to charity. Jessica was the coordinator, the puppet master, pulling strings from her downtown condo. She'd moved to our town 6 months ago, ostensibly to help Sarah's law firm with some kind of efficiency consulting. In reality, she seemed to specialize in destroying marriages. I learned all this through careful observation and strategic eavesdropping. The coffee shop across from Sarah's office had excellent sightlines and free Wi-Fi. The sports bar where Tom met his crew after work had a corner booth that was perfect for listening to conversations. Jessica's condo building had a parking garage that was easy to monitor from the street. By Friday, I had enough evidence to fill a manila folder. Photos of Sarah entering Tom's house, screenshots of text messages, a detailed timeline of their activities. I could have confronted them immediately, but that would have been amateur hour. I wanted them to destroy themselves. Friday dinner at the Mitchells was a masterpiece of psychological warfare. I arrived with a bottle of wine, the same brand Sarah had been buying for her secret rendezvous, and made sure to mention how much I appreciated good friends. "Tom, you and I have been through everything together," I said, raising my glass in a toast. "Thick and thin, good times and bad. I can't imagine what I'd do without friends I can trust completely." Tom's face went pale, but he managed to clink glasses with me. Sarah, sitting across the table, looked like she was going to be sick. "And Linda," I continued, turning to Tom's wife, "you're like the sister Sarah never had. It's so rare to find couples who can be completely honest with each other, don't you think?" "Absolutely," Linda agreed, beaming at what she thought was a touching moment of friendship. "Honesty is the foundation of any good relationship." Sarah excused herself to use the bathroom and didn't come back for 15 minutes. When she finally returned, her eyes were red and her hands were shaking slightly. "Everything okay, honey?" I asked with genuine-sounding concern. "You look upset." "Just tired," she mumbled. "Long week." "Well, you've certainly been putting in the hours lately," Linda chimed in. "Tom was just telling me how dedicated you are. Working until all hours, weekends, everything. I don't know how you do it." The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Tom was staring at his plate like it contained the secrets of the universe. Sarah was gripping her wine glass so tightly, I thought it might shatter. "Sarah's always been ambitious," I said, reaching over to squeeze her hand. She flinched at my touch. Sometimes I worry she's spreading herself too thin, though, taking on too much, trying to please too many people. Maybe you should take a vacation, Linda suggested innocently. Get away from all the stress. Tom and I were just talking about how nice it would be to have some time alone together, weren't we, honey? Tom made a choking sound and reached for his water glass. The evening continued in this vein for another hour, with me delivering perfectly innocent comments that landed like guided missiles. By the time we left, both Sarah and Tom looked like they'd been through a meat grinder. That was fun, I told Sarah as we drove home. We should do it more often. She didn't respond, just stared out the passenger window at the passing streetlights. You know what I love about Tom? I continued conversationally. He's so transparent. What you see is what you get. No hidden agendas, no secret motivations. Just an honest guy trying to do right by his family. Sarah's jaw was clenched so tightly, I could see the muscles standing out in her neck. Jake, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Can we just go home? Please? Of course, sweetheart. Home is where the heart is, right? The explosion came on Monday morning. I was in my workshop, pretending to focus on a hydraulic pump repair, when my phone started ringing. First Sarah, then Tom, then 3 of our mutual friends in rapid succession. I let them all go to voicemail. The messages were variations on the same theme. Jake, we need to talk. There's something you need to know. Please call me back. It's important. They'd finally worked up the courage to confess. Or more likely, the guilt and paranoia from Friday's dinner had pushed them over the edge. Either way, it was showtime. I drove to Murphy's Pub, the Irish bar where Tom and his construction crew hung out after work. It was early afternoon, so the place was mostly empty except for a few regulars, watching sports on the big screen. Tom was sitting in a corner booth, nursing a beer and looking like a man facing execution. Jake! He stood up as I approached, his smile as fake as a $3 bill. Thanks for coming. Listen, we need to talk about something important. Sure thing, buddy. I slid into the booth across from him and signaled the bartender for a beer. What's on your mind? Tom fidgeted with his bottle label, avoiding eye contact. This is really hard to say, but there's been a situation. With Sarah and, well, with me. A situation. I kept my voice neutral, curious but not alarmed. God, this is awful. We've been seeing each other. Behind your back. Behind Linda's back. The words tumbled out like he was ripping off a Band-Aid. It started a few months ago, and I know it's wrong, but we couldn't help ourselves, and how long? I interrupted quietly. What? How long has this been going on? Tom's face crumpled. 3 months, maybe 4. Jake, I'm so sorry. I never meant for this to happen. Sarah and I, we just connected on this deeper level, and I held up a hand to stop him. Let me guess. Jessica helped facilitate this connection? His shocked expression told me everything I needed to know. She introduced us to new perspectives, Tom said defensively. Helped us realize that we were both trapped in marriages that weren't fulfilling our true needs. Our true needs, I repeated slowly. And what exactly are your true needs, Tom? He straightened up, and for a moment I saw a flash of the arrogance that had been building over the past few months. Look, Jake, I know this is hard to hear, but Sarah and I are in love. Real love. Not the comfortable, boring routine that passes for marriage these days. Boring routine. The beer in my hand was getting warm, but I didn't drink it. Is that what 15 years of marriage is to you people? A boring routine? You have to understand, we never planned this. But when you find your soulmate, your true partner, you can't just ignore that connection because of some legal document. The casual dismissal of my marriage as some legal document was the final straw. I set down my beer very carefully and looked Tom Mitchell directly in the eyes. You know what I think, Tom? I think you're a pathetic, middle-aged cliché who convinced himself that screwing his best friend's wife makes him special, instead of just another cheating piece of garbage. His face flushed red. Now wait just a minute. No, you wait. My voice was still quiet, but there was steel in it now. You want to talk about true needs? Let me tell you about mine. I need friends who don't stab me in the back. I need a wife who honors her vows. I need to be able to trust the people I care about. Sarah doesn't love you anymore, Jake. She hasn't for years. We're doing you a favor by being honest about this. I laughed, and the sound made him flinch. A favor? You've been lying to me for months, Tom. Elaborate, creative lies. The only reason you're telling me now is because you got scared Friday night. What do you mean? I mean, I've known about your little affair since last week. I've been watching you, documenting everything, waiting to see if you'd find the courage to be the man I thought you were. The color drained from his face. You knew. I know about the wine bar meetings. I know about Linda taking the kids to her mother's house. I know about Jessica's role in all this. I leaned forward. I know everything, Tom. He was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications. When he spoke again, his voice was smaller, more defensive. So what now? You going to fight me for her? Because I'm telling you, Jake, she's made her choice. Fight you? I shook my head. Tom, you're not worth fighting. You're not worth the energy it would take to make a fist. I stood up to leave, then paused and looked back at him. But since you brought up choices, let me tell you about mine. I choose to have some self-respect. I choose to surround myself with people who have integrity. And I choose to make sure everyone in this town knows exactly what kind of man Tom Mitchell really is. His face went white. Jake, please. Think about Linda. Think about my kids. You should have thought about them before you decided to blow up two families for a cheap thrill. I walked out of Murphy's pub and into the afternoon sunshine, leaving Tom Mitchell to contemplate the wreckage of his comfortable life. The next phase of my plan required precision timing and careful orchestration. I'd learned in the Army that the most effective attacks are the ones your enemy doesn't see coming until it's too late to defend against them. Sarah was waiting for me when I got home, sitting at the kitchen table with her hands folded like she was preparing for a business meeting. She'd changed out of her work clothes into jeans and a sweater, probably trying to look casual and approachable. Tom called me, she said without preamble. He told me about your conversation. I figured he would. I opened the refrigerator and grabbed a beer, taking my time with the bottle opener. So, what's your version of events? Jake, please sit down. We need to talk about this like adults. Adults? I remained standing, leaning against the counter. Interesting choice of words, considering how you've been behaving. Her composure cracked slightly. I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. But this isn't some sordid affair. Tom and I have real feelings for each other. Real feelings. I took a long pull from my beer. Tell me, Sarah, when did these real feelings start? Before or after Jessica started filling your head with ideas about spreading your wings? She blinked, surprised that I'd connected those dots. Jessica has nothing to do with this. She just helped me realize that I've been settling for less than I deserve. Less than you deserve. I was starting to sound like a broken record, but I couldn't help repeating her words back to her. They were so perfectly revealing. And what exactly do you think you deserve? Passion, she said, lifting her chin defiantly. Excitement. Someone who sees me as more than just a roommate who shares expenses. A roommate? The casual cruelty of it hit me like a physical blow. Is that what I am to you, after 15 years? Jake, we both know this marriage has been dead for years. We're like business partners, not lovers. When was the last time we really talked about anything meaningful? When was the last time you surprised me or made me feel special, or when was the last time you gave me a chance? And I interrupted. You've been planning this exit strategy for months, haven't you? Getting your ducks in a row, making sure you had somewhere soft to land before you pulled the trigger. That's not how it happened. No? Then explain the timeline to me, Sarah. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you and Jessica cooked up this whole scheme to justify what you wanted to do anyway. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. I don't have to justify anything to you. I'm not happy, Jake. I haven't been happy for a long time, and I deserve a chance at real love. With Tom Mitchell. Yes, with Tom. He appreciates me. He makes me feel alive again. I set down my beer and looked at my wife, really looked at her, for what I knew would be the last time. She was beautiful, successful, articulate, and completely hollow inside. You know what the funny thing is, Sarah? I actually feel sorry for you. Sorry for me? Her voice rose an octave. I'm the one who's finally taking control of my life. You're the one who's throwing away 15 years of marriage for a fantasy. Tom's not going to leave Linda, not permanently. He might play house with you for a few months, maybe even a year, but eventually he'll get bored and move on to the next midlife crisis. You don't know what you're talking about. I know Tom Mitchell better than you do. I've known him for 20 years. He's not the passionate romantic hero Jessica convinced you he is. He's a weak man who takes what he wants and then finds excuses for why it's everyone else's fault. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but they looked more like tears of frustration than sadness. I can't do this anymore, Jake. I can't pretend to be happy in a marriage that feels like a prison sentence. Then don't, I said simply. Pack your bags and go. But don't insult my intelligence by pretending this is some grand love story. You're having a midlife crisis, and you're taking the easy way out. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her cycling through emotions: anger, guilt, defiance, fear. Finally, she settled on cold determination. Fine, I'll be out by the weekend. Good. That gives me time to change the locks and cancel the credit cards. Her eyes widened. Jake, we need to discuss the practical arrangements. The house, the bank accounts, my car. Your car that I've been making the payments on for 3 years? The credit cards that are in my name? The house that I put the down payment on? I shook my head. Sarah, you're about to learn the difference between being married and being single. I hope Tom's ready to support you in the style to which you've become accustomed. The color drained from her face as the financial reality of her situation hit her. She'd been so focused on the romance and excitement that she hadn't considered the practical implications of blowing up her life. We can work something out, she said weakly. We don't have to be enemies. You're right. We don't have to be enemies. I picked up my beer and headed for the stairs. But we're not going to be friends either. The annual Riverside Community Center fundraising dinner was the social event of the year in our small town. Everyone who was anyone showed up in their best clothes to eat rubber chicken and bid on silent auction items for local charities. Sarah had been on the organizing committee for 3 years running. She'd also been planning to attend with Tom Mitchell as her date, now that their affair was public knowledge. Linda had filed for divorce the day after I'd had my conversation with Tom, and the whole town was buzzing with gossip about the scandal. I hadn't planned to attend the dinner. Charity events weren't really my scene, and I figured it would be awkward for everyone involved. But then Jessica made the mistake of calling me. Jake, I think we should talk, she said when I answered the phone, about Sarah and Tom, and how we can all handle this situation like mature adults. Mature adults, I repeated. That seems to be the phrase of the month. Look, I know you're hurt, but Sarah is my family, and I'm not going to apologize for supporting her decision to find happiness. Supporting her decision. I was sitting in my workshop, cleaning the parts of a carburetor that didn't need cleaning. Is that what you call it? What's that supposed to mean? It means I know this whole thing was your idea, Jessica. The affair, the timing, the elaborate justifications. Sarah might be naive enough to think this was some spontaneous romance, but I know better. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Jessica spoke again, her voice was colder, more calculating. You're giving me too much credit, Jake. I'm just a consultant who happened to point out some uncomfortable truths about your marriage. Uncomfortable truths like how much better Sarah could do, how she deserved passion and excitement, how she was wasting her life with a boring husband who didn't appreciate her. If the shoe fits, the casual cruelty in her voice was breathtaking. This wasn't someone who'd gotten caught up in a complicated situation. This was someone who'd engineered the destruction of my marriage for her own entertainment. You know what, Jessica? You're right. I am boring. I go to work every day, pay my bills on time, keep my promises, and treat people with respect. Boring as hell. Sarah deserves better than that. Maybe she does. But she's not going to find it with Tom Mitchell, and she's definitely not going to find it by following advice from someone like you. Someone like me. Someone who gets her kicks by destroying other people's lives. Someone who's so empty inside that she needs to create drama just to feel alive. Jessica laughed, but it sounded forced. You're pathetic, Jake. No wonder Sarah was looking for a way out. Maybe I am pathetic. But at least I'm not going to spend the rest of my life wondering why I can't maintain a real relationship. I hung up before she could respond. That's when I decided to attend the charity dinner after all. I put on my best suit, the navy blue one I'd worn to my wedding 15 years earlier. It still fit mostly, though it was a little tight around the middle. I even wore the tie Sarah had bought me for Christmas 2 years ago, the one with the subtle pattern that she said brought out my eyes. The community center was decorated with white tablecloths and centerpieces made of local flowers. A jazz trio played softly in the corner while people mingled and examined the silent auction items. I recognized most of the faces: teachers, business owners, retirees, the usual crowd that showed up for these events. Sarah and Tom were holding court near the bar, accepting condolences and congratulations with equal grace. She was wearing a red dress I'd never seen before, something low cut and attention grabbing that was completely unlike her usual conservative style. Tom was in an expensive looking suit, his arm possessively around Sarah's waist. Jessica stood nearby, surveying the scene like a general reviewing her troops. She'd chosen a black cocktail dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, and she wore it with the confidence of someone who'd never doubted her own superiority. I got a beer from the bar and found a table near the back of the room, close enough to observe, but far enough away to avoid immediate confrontation. Several people stopped by to offer awkward condolences about my situation, and I accepted them with polite thanks and strategic silence. The evening's program began with the usual speeches from local dignitaries and charity representatives. Then came the silent auction results, followed by a live auction for the bigger ticket items. I bid on a weekend fishing trip and won it for twice what it was worth, which earned me some appreciative nods from the organizers. Finally, it was time for the evening's keynote speaker, the mayor, talking about community values and supporting our neighbors through difficult times. The irony wasn't lost on me. That's when I made my move. During the applause for the mayor's speech, I stood up and walked to the microphone. The room gradually fell quiet as people realized something unscripted was happening. "I'm sorry to interrupt," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the sound system. "But I wanted to take a moment to thank everyone for their support during what's been a challenging time for my family." I could see Sarah's face from across the room. She looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. As most of you know, my wife Sarah has decided to end our marriage in order to pursue a relationship with Tom Mitchell. And while that's been personally difficult, I want to publicly wish them both the best in their new life together. The room was dead silent now. Even the servers had stopped moving. I also want to thank Jessica Patterson, Sarah's consultant and advisor, for her role in helping my wife discover her true feelings. It takes a special kind of person to dedicate themselves to other people's personal relationships with such enthusiasm. Jessica's face had gone pale, but her eyes were blazing with anger. "You see, I've learned something important over the past few weeks. I've learned that some people will tell you exactly who they are if you just pay attention. Some people value loyalty, honesty, and commitment, and some people value excitement, novelty, and personal satisfaction above everything else." I paused, letting that sink in. The thing is, both approaches have consequences. When you build your life around loyalty and commitment, you sometimes end up getting hurt by people who don't share those values. But when you build your life around personal satisfaction and excitement, you end up hurting other people. And eventually, you end up alone. Tom was shifting uncomfortably in his seat, and Sarah looked like she was going to be sick. So I want to make a prediction, if you'll indulge me. Within 6 months, Tom is going to realize that Sarah isn't the exciting escape from responsibility he thought she was. She's a real person with real needs and real problems, not a fantasy. And Sarah is going to realize that Tom isn't the passionate romantic hero she imagined. He's a middle-aged man who abandoned his family for a midlife crisis. The room was so quiet you could hear people breathing. And Jessica? Well, Jessica is going to move on to her next project, because destroying my marriage was never about helping Sarah find happiness. It was about proving that she could do it. I set the microphone back in its stand and looked directly at the three of them. I hope I'm wrong about all of this. I hope you find everything you're looking for. But if I'm right, Don't expect me to be waiting around to pick up the pieces. I walked out of the community center and into the cool evening air, leaving behind 15 years of marriage, 20 years of friendship, and a room full of people who would be talking about this night for years to come. 6 months later, Sarah called me. Tom had gone back to Linda, begging for forgiveness and a second chance. Jessica had moved to Chicago, claiming she'd found a better business opportunity. Sarah was living in a studio apartment downtown, working longer hours to pay bills she'd never had to worry about before. "I made a mistake," she said through tears. "A terrible, stupid mistake. Is there any chance we could try again?" I thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. "No, Sarah, there isn't. Jake, please, I know I hurt you, but people make mistakes. People change. I've learned so much about myself, about what really matters." "What really matters," I interrupted, "is that you showed me exactly who you are when you thought the consequences didn't apply to you. I can forgive you for leaving me. I can even forgive you for the affair. But I can't forget the person you became when you thought you could get away with it." She cried for a while, and I let her. When she finally stopped, I said the last words I would ever speak to her. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Sarah, but you're not going to find it with me." I hung up the phone and went back to rebuilding the engine I'd been working on. Some things, once they're broken, can't be fixed. But some things can be built better than they were before.